If we walk away from ourselves and our own pain, the pain gets louder, and our brain can find all kinds of ways to ratchet up the experience of the pain, because all it's really trying to do is get our attention. And so it's a little counterintuitive then that we have to turn our attention to our own body when it's in pain. And I'm sure many of you had the experience where the last thing you want to do is have to pause and deal with, say, a broken toe. You just ran into the edge of a bed, and man, does that hurt. It hurts so bad. And we have to attend to it. But there's also then that irritation with self that we ran into the edge of the bed. And many of us will also start to just ask ourselves how we could have done such a stupid thing. And we're not very caring and kind. And that can actually make the pain also worse than it is to begin with. But when we give ourselves attention, almost immediately, this pain will begin to lessen. However, we have a very strong thinking brain that instinctively will tell us to get away from the pain. It'll tell us to anything that's dangerous, and of course, pain is dangerous. Anything that's dangerous, we need to get away from it. And as we get away from it, what we've done inadvertently is that we've abandoned ourselves. And so what happens here in this process is that we have two very intelligent halves of our brain, but they work in different ways. And they also work in different systems. We've got a thinking brain, which is our logical brain, and we've got an emotional brain, which is our creative brain. We have a nurturing system, which is a healing system. And then we also have a stress response system. And depending on which one is activated, we're going to get the output of that. We have a highly activated stress response, and our stress response is running the show. We end up with inflammation. We end up with joints hurting because of that, autoimmune disorders and things like that. Again, it's counterintuitive that there's something we can do to help that. But it's amazing how much emotional energy is in an autoimmune disorder. When you start giving yourself kindness, caring for yourself, this creative brain starts to open back up to you, and it will give you the kind of information and the kind of healing that you need. And that may be go get a massage, might mean you need some tea and wrap yourself up in a warm blanket. Those kinds of needs get met and known when you can settle out the negative thinking. And so what I'm really talking about here is the fight or flight response, that in the fight or flight response, our thinking brain, it tends to shut down, and our emotional brain can take over. The emotional brain says, run away. The thinking is kind of offline then. And it can be confusing because the emotional brain can get us to move away from something. The thinking brain can convince us that that is a good idea. The thinking brain then can give us all kinds of reasons why we need to stay away. And the thinking brain can also accuse the emotional brain that it's, well, this is really all your fault. If you weren't so emotional, we wouldn't have any problems. And they kind of begin to fight with one another. It's calmness that brings them back together so that they can unify. And when you have a unified brain, unified heart comes along with it too. You begin to feel your heart and compassion for your body. And then the thinking brain can come along and hear and act out what needs to be acted out, such as a warm bath. The whole idea is to not abandon ourselves, that if we walk away from pain or our own distress, we are abandoning ourselves. When we abandon a crying baby, it just keeps crying and it will cry louder and louder. When we go and move towards that crying baby, we pick it up, him or her up. For just a moment, it might actually cry louder, and then it settles down. So the same thing is true for us. We attend to our own hurts. Sometimes that pain actually increases a little bit, and it can be scary. But to stay with ourselves and that pain, it begins to resolve because we're finally getting our needs met. It's really up to us to take care of ourselves when when we're having any kind of an upset, whether it's physical, emotional, mental, even spiritual, it's up to us to move along the path to figure out what it is that we need.